It feels like you can get your credit scores anywhere these days. Random websites, card statements, budgeting apps, heck, even your dog might bark out a few numbers. It's true. Credit Karma isn't the only place you can find them. But we actually do more with your scores to help you find your next financial opportunity. Like a more rewarding credit card, a game plan that helps you pay down debt faster, or a personal loan to help you save more on interest payments each month. Cha-ching! The possibilities are kinda endless. Download Intuit Credit Karma today to get started.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger for thousands of appetizing ingredients that inspire countless mouth-watering meals. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices. Plus, extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week and up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with points. So you can get big flavors and big savings. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Welcome to People Tech, the podcast of WorkforceAI.news. I'm Mark Pfeffer. My guest today is Geoff Webb. He's a long-term industry analyst, a contributing analyst to 3Sixty Insights, and the author of Center the Pendulum, a new book about HR that's available on Amazon. We're going to talk about a new product that we've just discovered that brings AI to the world of job hunters. So, Geoff, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So, apparently on GitHub has appeared an app or a bot, to be technically correct about it, that will go through job ads on LinkedIn, pick out the ones that it thinks are right for you, and then apply for them. Not just sending your resume in a cover letter, but also answering basic questions that that may be asked during the initial screening process. So all of a sudden, talent acquisition teams and employers aren't the only ones who have AI in their quiver. Now job hunters have it too. So let me ask you first, what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. My reaction is that it's not surprising that we see AI popping up on the sort of the applicant side, or sometimes it feels more like the supplicant side. The recruiters themselves have been using AI for some time now to filter and stack rank and sort of route resumes as they come in. So I think it's inevitable that you see it popping up on the other side too. I think it speaks to this almost sort of sense of an arms race between recruiter and recruitee as far as getting through the process is concerned. It's and that ultimately, I think, it feels like it's almost becoming very adversarial between the people applying for jobs and the companies to which they're applying, and that this is therefore an unexpected but rather sobering twist, I think, to the story right now.
Well, it struck me as being kind of inevitable that at some point someone was going to start to develop AI tools, for candidates. The product's called AI Hawk, and its developer, who's an Italian software developer, says the idea was to sort of level the playing field between employers and candidates. Does this really do that?
Unlikely, I would think, in the first iteration of these things. You've seen the sort of development of the early days of some of the large language models and the generative stuff that was, rudimentary, I think, at best, and sometimes downright disturbing. My sense would be that this, though, is the opening salvo in what is inevitably going to continue, that people are going to use these tools. The tools are going to be developed. And again, you're going to see this sort of sense of, as applicants automate the process of reaching further for more jobs, looking to get through the sort of the hoops that are put in place from the point of view of the recruiter, as they filter the applicants and they route them and so on and rank them. It's inevitable this thing's going to get better. So would I personally use it? Probably. I would be a little skeptical of allowing something else to completely take the process of applying for a job and answering questions for me. even with the sort of benefit of scale. But do I think it's going to continue? Yeah, I think to your point, it's inevitably going to continue to develop, and I would expect to see more and more of these tools coming up.
So how's that changed the dynamics of the hiring process? I mean, there was somebody on GitHub who said they've been using this and they applied for 2,800 jobs over the course of 3 months. That's got to have an impact on talent acquisition.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, I think it goes back to, it starts to feel adversarial, right? It starts to feel as though you're in some kind of arms race between the two sides. That on the talent acquisition side, they are typically massively overworked. They don't have enough people. They're often struggling to get, to figure out how to get the right candidates in the door and route them and filter them. And so inevitably they move to automation and AI to try and help in that process. At the same time, as a person applying for a job, you're simply trying to get in front of an actual human being. And so as a result, you can go a couple of different ways. You can become highly targeted, or you can become much more of a broad kind of reach approach. And I think this speaks to that second of, if I just apply to enough stuff, eventually I'll get in front of a person. The point here is, though, what should be a very almost uniquely human-to-human interaction, one-to-one interaction between a person and a company. Like, I'm applying for a job to fill a team, a vacancy on a team, working with a group of other people. You're essentially increasingly removing humans at either end of that interaction. And I feel like that direction is not an entirely healthy direction to be headed.
Well, and this also sets up a situation where the first step could be AI talking to AI. I mean, assuming that the ATS that the employer is using has some kind of AI, technology, which, probably does this day and age.
Mm-hmm.
That removes the human from the initial contact completely.
Yeah.
What's the long-term impact of that?
The thing that strikes me first, when I first heard about this from you, actually, and then we've been thinking about this. One of the things that strikes me immediately is, again, as you remove the person from the process, what are you left with? Right? You're left with essentially, their resume, their answers to their questions. You're not hiring a resume. At some point, the actual person has to turn up, interact with other actual people, and do a job that needs to be delivered. And by putting all of these sort of non-human interactions in place, you're simply delaying the point at which you can make an actual evaluative judgment about whether this person fits in your team, fits in the company, fits in the culture. And if I think back, so many of the conversations I've had have been about cultural fit rather than simply experience. So many people are thinking, how do I hire people that will fit in my team, that will fit within my culture, that I would want to work with? And yet what's happening is the process is devolving into, can I put in place a sufficiently complex set of checklists such that your AI, as it answers those questions, sounds like you're the right kind of person, and filtering if you don't do as well as everybody else does. And so you're taking the person out of this, and the person is the very thing you're trying to get to.
Well, but if this is applied at the earliest stages of the process, basically the screening phase, is the screening phase where you identify people with cultural fit anyway? I mean, isn't this just maybe adding a step to screening, welcome or not, but employers will still have to winnow it down from a screening data set to handpicked?
You do. But again, what's happening here is you're essentially, you have to think, what am I evaluating against, right? And I'm evaluating against whatever AI tool you have's ability to match whatever AI tools set of parameters have been set in order to filter this person. And I feel like that becomes an extraordinarily artificial, and no pun intended, but it's there, right? Artificial exchange of, I'm going to use a better AI tool to describe me than than somebody else, and as a result, I will get through as a candidate. I appreciate that your ability to that's a proxy for your ability to write a good resume too. And yet the the increased artificiality of that interaction strikes me as just heading in the wrong direction. And yes, I appreciate I don't have a good answer for how to recruit at scale, except to start to ask the question, why is that the problem that so many organizations are facing? Why is it that there is so much, and this I think is the more fundamental question, why is so much of the workforce on the move looking for another job? And why are so many organizations struggling to filter through this wave of people moving? The use of AI to supplement your recruitment team's capabilities is understandable and reasonable. I'm not critical of that. And the use of AI to connect to those things is becoming inevitable. But again, why is so much of the workforce moving? What's going on? How are organizations managing recruitment and retention to keep people rather than seeing these just great tidal waves of people moving backwards and forwards and using tools to attempt to connect to a potential future recruiter?
Well, I wonder if part of that is the worker's perception. I mean, for all the talk about AI that we've heard in the last couple of years, I haven't heard any job seeker say that the process has gotten better for them.
No, it's not. I agree. I think it feels like you're guessing what the answers should be. It's like you're trying, you're doing some kind of IQ test where you're not really sure what the question was going to be. You don't really understand it, and you're not sure what they're looking for. So you're guessing. And that's, again, I think maybe that's a function. I know, Mark, I don't know what you think about this. Maybe that's a function of the fact that the AI recruitment tools need to continue to develop more. Perhaps as they get better, we'll see a more natural interaction. But right now, it feels like from the sort of the side that's trying to go find that job, right? The applicant side, it feels like it's a very difficult process to get any sense of, am I doing it? This is a job that's great for me, and yet do I have any chance of even getting an interview?
Hey, it's Bob Pulver, host of You Podcast. Human-centric AI, AI-driven transformation, hiring for skills and potential, dynamic workforce ecosystems, responsible innovation. These are some of the themes my expert guests and I chat about, and we certainly geek out on the details. Nothing too technical. I hope you check it out.
Hey, this is William Tincup, Work Defined. Hey, listen, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Inside the C-Suite, the podcast. It's a look into the journey of how one goes from high school, college, whatever, all the way to the C-Suite, all the ups and downs, failures, successes, all that stuff. Give it a listen. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast.
What's your reaction to the idea of this is leveling the playing field between job seekers and employers?
Again, I agree. But my question is, you're leveling the playing field, but what's the game you're playing? Like, yes, I think we've now both got sets of AI tools, and again, one presumes that the applicant AI tools will continue to develop. The applicant tools will continue to develop in such a way as they can help you more quickly apply to more jobs to make you look more appealing to a potential employer. The AI recruitment tools will continue to develop in that they'll get smarter and smarter at filtering and looking for things that, one imagines at some point fairly quickly, they'll start to look for signals that the applicant is using AI to apply to help filter them out. So yeah, you are back to an arms race of whose AI is going to be the best at fooling the other person. And again, is that really the direction we're headed? Yes, it's leveling the playing field, but what playing field and what game and what's the objective of winning in this?
Well, and if it's leveling the playing field based on numbers alone, that's not necessarily a good thing. It sounds like that could create a lot of churn.
It does. And we haven't even touched on the point that all of this assumes that both sides are acting in good faith. So it assumes that the AI tool that I'm employing to go get me a job, I'm feeding it with accurate information, or that it is actually being truthful about me. And it presumes, of course, that on the recruitment side that there's a real job and that they're really looking for the things that they say there are. And so once you start to go, well, actually, we already know that there's fake jobs out there that people are using just to gather information. And we know that from, whether it's competitive intelligence or just, for other scams, and we definitely know that there are sort of pseudo applicants who are out there who are applying for jobs on skills they don't have, or they're simply doing so in order to appear to be looking for jobs for other reasons. That all just escalates and goes faster because now it's automation. One thing, what does automation do? It always makes things go faster. It makes the bad things go just as fast as the good things. It makes the bad things just as capable as the good things. So, as that expression is, it's technologies it's neither good nor bad, but it is also never neutral, right? This will be used both sides for good and bad, which means it'll just go faster and just become more difficult. And I feel like that's the path we're headed down with this.
Well, let me go back to the idea of good faith. I think there's a lot of job seekers out there who would argue that employers aren't necessarily operating in good faith. They're posting dummy jobs, to gather resumes. They're replying to applications within seconds, turning somebody down so they really haven't screened. They're ghosting. They just stop returning an applicant's calls. So it's understandable that a lot of candidates would go for something like this that, in theory, would make their lives easier. Because why not have their life benefit from automation in the same way that employers do? I suppose that argument may be true, but is it healthy?
Yeah, and that's the point, right? I don't blame. In fact, I don't judge either side for using the technology. Of course, I know recruiters. They are relentlessly overworked. They have too many jobs to go fill. They usually have too little information from the hiring managers. They're desperately trying to figure out how to find. They're under the gun. They have metrics that are just how many job roles can you fill this quarter? If you're not filling enough, you're out looking for another job, right? And at the same time, you've got applicants who are looking for another job either because they're out of work right now or they're simply looking to change. They don't, they want to improve, build their career, find a better place to call work home. So obviously both sides are going to use every tool at their disposal. But again, it's the case of even with good faith, the experience is going to become less human, more automated, and it already feels pretty ugly. It already, to your point, absolutely, the experience is often you can apply for a job which would appear to have been custom written for you this is exactly my background, exactly what I've done, and you never hear anything, or you hear anything. If you hear something, it can be months later. I know of one lady who applied for a job, and she didn't hear for, I think it was like 6 months to 7 months until they said, "Oh yes, we're actually interested in you." And you go, well, that's a pretty terrible recruiting experience, even if you then subsequently get the job. So, it can feel extremely impersonal. I agree. The whole sort of thanks, but no thanks messages you get in email rarely give you any indication of why you weren't considered. And then, yes, you can go down a lot of conversations, a lot of the sort of down the road, and then simply disappear. The people, the job just vanishes. You never get an answer back. So it's already a pretty ugly process, I think, for reasons of scale and pressure and acceleration of business. I just feel like leveling that playing field and making it less human is not going to improve anyone's experience. And I think both sides are going to come at this increasingly cynically, seeing that the other side is using tools to automate and obfuscate the process. And I think that is going to make this more adversarial, less human. And I think by the time you actually finally get a job offer, you're going to feel like you've already been mugged 4 times.
Well, and this is an early on application. In order to use it, you have to know Python, because there's a couple of steps you need to take in Python. But there are reportedly some folks who are developing a version that doesn't require coding or doesn't require programming knowledge. In other words, it'll be a consumer style interface. So anybody could use it off the shelf. I mean, that's just kind of like throwing gas on the fire, I think.
Oh, yeah. And again, it's inevitable, right? It's absolutely inevitable. It's probably a great business opportunity. Go build an app that will, I never need to lift a finger. It'll simply sit there and find me my next job. The fact that it has gone through and applied for 3,000 jobs in the meantime that I wasn't even aware of, starts to make you, it makes sense from the point of view of going to build the tool. I just question what either side is going to get out of that. The applicant is going to be you're really not engaged in finding your next job, and the recruiters are going to get people who appear to be a great fit, who may not even know they're applying for a job with that company. In fact, probably won't know that they're applying for a job with that company. So, that first question of what do you know about us is going to become very, very apposite, because the answer is probably going to be, I don't know, I've never heard of you before. I didn't even know I'd applied for this job. So what's it about? I mean, that doesn't feel like that's headed in the right direction at all.
Yeah, you do kind of hope that folks would keep track of what the app is applying to, so they're ready for.
You would. You're more of an optimist than I am.
I don't know. I mean, I assumed employers would do a lot of things with AI too. So where does this go? I mean, if you've got this kind of product, and let's assume that it starts to grow as more versions come out and more people hear about it. How does this impact the whole process, and how does it impact the folks in talent acquisition?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it doesn't make their lives any easier at all. Right. Again, they're already overwhelmed. That's why they're using these tools to help filter and rank resume. I mean, they're already overwhelmed. Now that just means they're dealing with a situation in which the person they're talking to may not be a person at all. It might be some AI bot that's happily chatting away with, literally maybe actually chatting away with them online in order to set up an interview before the human actually gets involved. So I don't think that's going to help either side particularly. I think, there's what it asks fundamentally of all of us is there a better way of doing this, right? We know there's a lot of people who look for jobs. We know there's jobs out there. Are there better approaches to matching those two things than this sort of spray and pray approach of applying for jobs that's simply getting accelerated with automation and AI, and the process of, putting in what can often feel like extraordinarily arbitrary filters to reduce and rank the people coming in? And I think there are glimmers of hope here, right? There are glimmers of hope that we start to think about, well, is it possible to start to build central repositories of experience and skills that are actually manageable, that are actually reliable, right? Does public ledger technology start to open the door to actually building, this is what I did and this is how I did it, and here's a taxonomy, connects to taxonomies. We're a long way off from this. But are there ways of building a knowledge base of workforce such that employers and employees can reliably trust each other to do a match that actually says, actually, I think you're great for this job. It sounds like you've done exactly the right things at companies just like us. Would you be interested? As opposed to, here's the barriers over which you must leap to get even to talk to a human being. Meanwhile, I'm automating the process of, leaping over those barriers with a piece of software.
Well, so in your mind, if you were king, what would the ideal hiring process look like? How would it work from start to finish?
Well, first of all, I would never want to be the king. I'm not a great monarchist, despite my accent. So please take that one back. I think what would the ideal hiring process look like? I think the ideal hiring process would be, first of all, that recruiters generally get more support and help in the process, right? That they're they're often treated just to sort of go bring people in and make sure they're the right people, right? And figure that out yourself. I think businesses need to get better at understanding how to recruit. And that means often focusing less on the arbitrary list of things that you must have before we'd even talk to you, and much better at the sort of list of things that we actually believe are important to us as an organization. Does it actually matter if I've had 5 years experience, or does it really matter whether I've had any, what's the experience that I care about? What are the characteristics of this person that I'm looking for to recruit and entice the right people, not act as barriers and blockers to filter people out? And I think the process needs to get to a place where it's much easier to connect the right people with the job at the right time. So again, it's helping to build out agreed approaches to defining skills and experience such that we can know when we're talking to somebody that's really what they have. And the process should be much more human. It should be less about, look, I can do this job. I've done this job for 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is. That's understood. Let's get to the important stuff, which is when you work with me day in, day out, how do I work? What's it like? What's my behaviors like as a person within an organization? How do I fit within your culture? I honestly, I know you know, your sense is that's a later conversation. I think that's the conversation. I think a lot of this is you can learn to, with the exception of maybe going to be a thoracic surgeon, you can probably learn most things pretty quickly. The question is, do you do them in the right way that is successful for the rest of the business without putting a tax on everybody else around you? I feel like that the human questions here are the ones that are most important. So the quicker we can get past the, do you have this qualification? Have you done this job before? What size business did you work for? All those other things. Let's get rid of that and really focus in on the, how do you do this? What's your thought processes? What's the approach you take? How do you work with other people? And understand the human aspects, because those are the things that kill companies, not the skill set. You can have great, and we all know this, great people with great skills that, because of how they operate, are disasters for a business. Let's try and filter that stuff out.
So are there things that the developers of ATSs should be thinking about if this is getting out there?
For this, yeah, my sense is going to be, we're already looking at, let's be honest, this is essentially sort of almost deep faking the interview process, right? This is, how do I make it appear that I am thoroughly engaged in you're the one company I really want to work for, whereas in fact I've just applied for 3,000 other jobs. At the same time, the same technology is developing to identify when things are propagated, created, generated, and produced by artificial intelligence, and that's going to happen at the recruiter side too, because they're going to want to know that you didn't really apply for this job, that you may not have truthfully answered those questions. So at this point, you start to looking for what are the signals that would indicate that this person is simply bulk applying for, thousands of jobs using an AI admin tool that's essentially a bot that's just flooding the net. That can happen, right? That can happen using existing technology. It's quite possible for companies to start to, you could simply say, is everybody seeing the same set of applicants from the same person? Are we seeing this in the same industries? Those sort of things. But that's going to have to happen too, is they're going to have to start, and they're going to want to start thinking about, how do I filter that stuff out? Because chances are you don't want to be wasting time trying to set up interviews with somebody that doesn't know that they've applied for a job with you, because they may not be interested. They may have already taken a job somewhere else. They may not even be looking for a job. You may have these things simply running constantly in the background, trawling to see if there's something that's interesting out there. Don't think that's an ideal situation for recruiters by any stretch of the imagination.
No, that's a good point. Well, Geoff, thanks very much. It's always good to talk with you, and I know we'll talk again.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. I always appreciate a chance to chat with you. And it's always interesting stuff. It's never a dull moment. So yeah, thank you for this. My guest today has been Geoff Webb, contributing analyst at 3Sixty Insights and author of the new book, Center the Pendulum. And this has been People Tech, the podcast of WorkforceAI.news. We're also a part of the Work Defined Podcast Network. Find them at www.wrkdefined.com. And to keep up with AI technology and HR, subscribe to Workforce AI Today. We're the most trusted source of news in the HR tech industry. Find us at www.workforceai.news. I'm Mark Pfeffer.